This episode of the Digital Instruction Network is sponsored by REMC Association of Michigan. For more than 50 years, they have been providing digital media services as well as educator professional learning to educators and schools all over the state of Michigan. For more information on their programs, including the 21 Things program, the Classroom Makers program, and Playdates, please visit remc.org. That's REMC.org. Welcome back. This is 517 EdTech's Digital Instruction Network. I am Andrew Shaver, Instruction and Technology Coach at Ingham Intermediate School District in Mason, joined as always by the legendary Christy Lobdell, Assistive Technology at Eaton RESA, and Allison Rogers, aka Allison the Great, Instructional Technology Specialist up at Clinton County RESA. And today we are joined by a trio of comets. Three educators from the great district of Grand Ledge. Lori Smith, who's a first grade teacher at Wachusett Elementary, and Tim Madden, who teaches with her out in Wachusett Elementary, teaches sixth grade, and Patrick Beimhold, who's an education technology coach for the district. How we doing, everybody?
Good. Doing good. Yeah.
Doing good?
All right. Interesting day. It's warm outside. Good.
Yes.
Sun is shining.
Today, what we want to talk about a little bit is Patrick and Lori and Tim were not novices to technology when the pandemic came down. You guys had a sense of what you were doing with the tech. You had some routines, you had some habits, you had some things you knew were your strengths. But I think it's important to keep in mind that what we asked teachers to do during the pandemic was not something we'd ever asked teachers to do before. Online instruction was a thing, but it was very much asynchronous almost all the time. There was very little live direct instruction happening in most online models. So when we took a lot of our teachers and sent them home and said, we need you to give daily instruction live to students, whether you were a tech user that had some strength or not, was not necessarily something that was predictive of your success. I mean, it certainly helped to be comfortable with technology, but what we were asking teachers to do, simply we hadn't asked teachers to do before. So why don't you guys get started a little bit and share out a little bit, what was life like for you before the pandemic sort of struck, and what's it kind of been looking like during the instruction during the pandemic?
I know I was telling all of you earlier that, we were asked to rate ourselves on a scale from our principal, like 0 through 10. How do you feel about this? Like 0 being, I'm great, like, let's do this. And 10 being, I have a lot of anxiety. I don't think I can. And I remember thinking like, I'm good. Like, I think I'm like a 1. I think I'm a good solid 1 and maybe a 0. Like, I'm good. Let's do this. And then once we started, I was kind of like, oh dear, I've got work to do. I'm scared a little, but I feel like there was a big learning curve. Like, I did really feel like, Tim and I used a lot of technology, and I did not use a lot of the like teachers' manuals as far as like reading things out of them, or giving my kids a ton of paper and pencil. I was not pushing a lot of papers on my kids during the school year, a typical school day, the normal school year. So I felt really good about this transition. And then once we started, it was like, oh, wait, no, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, there's so much more I've got to do and so much more I've got to revamp. So, a lot of it started just from watching YouTube videos too, of like, how do teachers teach like guided reading? Like, how do you do small group, and how do you do an actual Zoom session, like a lesson with your kids? So a lot of mine just came from like YouTubing and like keeping notes of what I liked and what I didn't like, and then kind of like learning the kids and kind of, but it almost was like, I almost feel like this year has kind of been like a what's the word? Like a revamping of like my whole like teaching everything I knew, really. Like, and again, Tim and I felt like we were pretty savvy with a lot of this stuff. And as far as using like the resources that like our math and our like reading curriculum had given us, we'd already used a lot of that online, but now it became how am I going to like run my day virtually?
Like it's funny because we're just about to show the kids a TED talk on those oral placeholders, and all that. Anyways, sorry. So, see, did it again. It's weird because, I mean, it's very cool. I'm jealous of all the college students, psych college students, who have been given more material than they could ever know what to do with in the next bunch of years, decades, to look and go, wow, let's just look at the example of this group of kids. They were with their teacher. They got into the routine. They bought in. Well, maybe they bought into the system. They knew the person. They knew the dynamics. Then it was all taken away, and there was a lot of grief involved there, and that was kind of weird. But the advantage that I had was when we went to virtual, I knew the kids, and then you get a complete flip side. And I remember talking to Patrick and Lori before the beginning of the year and saying how, and it was, and it still will be, how exciting it is, because, we're going to have a chance to teach them so many skills where we wouldn't be able to do that because they have to leave for specials, or there's recess, or there's going to be this interruption, or these adults are going to come and bother me in my room. But then you get into the reality. We talked about this a little bit before, where, now I'm dealing with a bunch of kids that not only do not, I don't get to see their faces real often, but they don't share their personalities, because there is that whole other thing that Mr. Madden has I have learned to, bow down and not even challenge the whole privacy thing. And it took me weeks, but once you kind of get past, the relationship is going to be really different, because they're coming in, and trust is a totally different animal this year than it was ever before in my career. Because if you can get them to trust you in the classroom, then you can start having fun. Then you can come to some certain agreements, right, about social behavior and respect and all that. And then you can run. That's the best, is when you show them something new in technology, and within 90 seconds, they're ready for you to be quiet and let them go their own way, so that they can continue to create. And there's a few more layers there that it took me quite a while to realize. Okay, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? Well, because there's some resistance, because these guys aren't, they're not happy about this situation. Mm-hmm. It really, my kids were very unhappy at the beginning of the year about not being at school. So that took a while. But we eventually, way longer than it usually takes, we have sort of gotten past that.
And one of the cool things that I think that that I really got to do this year, and Tim, you'll have to say if you've gotten to do this too, but is that whole the differentiating for the kids piece has been amazing. Like, I can run like different math groups now based on what they need. And I love that it can be optional. So it doesn't have to be, you are coming to this group because you need help. It's hey, if you need help or you have questions, jump on this Zoom link, and like I'm there to help you, or my TA is there to help you. But if you felt like math was too easy today, like jump on this Zoom link and hey, I'll meet you there. And we're going to work on second grade stuff. We're going to work on third grade stuff. If that's what you need or that's what you want, like jump there. If writing is a little bit hard for you right now, or you struggle to get ideas, like jump on this link. So that I have a resource right at my fingertips. If somebody needs a math tool, or somebody needs extra help in doing the math or doing the writing or some reading, like fluency, there it is. Like, I've got all these projects laid out in my Explain Everything now for like higher math, kids that need help in math, like kids that need fluency, kids that need reading support. Like, I've got all these projects that I've got at my fingertips now that I've never really had.
But even if you go back in person, you're still going to be able to use those resources, even though you're standing in front of the students versus sitting in front of a camera.
Right. But I think just because I built them out of necessity this year, what started as necessity kind of turned into like a passion. It kind of turned into like a driving force. Like, this is fun. This is great. Like, I'm just going to keep going. I could build this and this and that. And
I think the important thing too, like something that I really picked up on with what you just said, is that you and many teachers have just got into the poetry unit and said, here's my poetry unit packet. I'm going to make copies, and this is how we present the material for this unit. And this year you thought, okay, I could do that and I could make the copies and send them home, or let's explore and let's see other ways where for me to be able to present this material this year, because this year is different and I do have time to explore, and my kids are learning in a different way this year and I'm teaching in a different way. So let's not go back to how it's always been done, which was great. Things were good before, but now we don't have to do it that way. That's really what I'm picking up on what you're saying, is that now you have a whole new set of materials and ways to present material and for your students to interact.
When I'm teaching reading or writing or math, or I'm teaching a skill of some kind, from what I can tell, the teachers are trying to meet the needs of all the students that are involved in that session. My highs, my needs, and lows, I'm trying to meet the needs of all of them. I'm not able to just meet the needs of most of my students, and then from there break out into small group for my highs and small group for my lows. At least that's been the traditional way of thinking. So when I've worked with teachers on creating videos, their videos will end up being 30 minutes. Patrick, I got my lesson made and my video was 35 or 30, 40 minutes. If it's high school, it may be even longer. And I'm like, okay, well, you got to get it down to 10. You got to get it down below that. Well, I can't teach if I got to have a video that short. I have to have this, I got all this information I need to share. I hope that when we come back, the teachers can understand that they can use the technology as a way to address the needs at the highs, mediums, and lows. I can put together a video that gets all my students. And then if there are students that can know more, I can work with them, or I can create another video that's even gives more information than I gave for the general, for the majority of the students in my classroom. And then if I have students that didn't get it, I can have a quick video that I can put together that's going to show them the skills they need to get up to where we're at and working in our math skill today or this week. But we tend to, when we're teaching a skill, think we have to meet all the needs of the students in the one session, and it ends up taking us much longer to try and get that across than I think it really needs to.
How can I digitize my system now that I have to? That's one question that some teachers are asking. I have my system, I like my system. How can I make sure my system functions through this sort of digital interface? And then there's the question that says, okay, I'm in this situation and I've got to teach these things. What's the best way to do that? And those are two separate questions. And one of them is something that sort of is trying to keep things as similar to what they were as possible while changing some of the delivery mechanisms. And the other one says, we are in an entirely separate type of environment now, and I've got the time, and I've got the curiosity, and I've got the tools, and I've got the energy. Why don't we look at each one of these like teachable moments we have to craft and say, what would be the best way to craft this teachable moment in this environment that I'm in right now? Whether that relates to what I did before or not is irrelevant, kind of. It's how am I going to do this the best way I can do this now in the situation that I'm in?
Before COVID, we had the opportunity to model for the teachers how they could use technology in their classrooms. From any and all of the professional development that we provide for teachers, but we still fall back on lecture-based, sage on the stage kind of models when it comes to teaching our own teachers. So this year, or I guess March of last year, it forced us to start teaching in a very different way, and we didn't have to before.
Because Lori and Patrick, especially Lori, will say things once in a while, and I'll think, God, dog it, I slip back into the, well, this is what I've been doing. And even if you're doing something that you did before in the classroom with technology, you have to be careful with that, because it's not the same thing. The kid, if you're doing something, teaching them about Google Drawings or even Google Forms or slides, or how to put movies or iMovie into a slide and that kind of thing, which is all cool. How to create hyperdocs, that's all cool too. And they get excited, but they're not with you. And you have to figure out, okay, I need to get from where I am to where they are. And it's not as linear as it used to be. It used to be they were right there. I'd set up the lesson, I'd explain it and turn them loose. And then I can rely on my experts in the classroom to help each other out. Well, in this environment, that's almost non-existent. Even with the odd breakout room here and there, which for the most part, my kids cannot stand. But you really have to, again, like Lori said earlier, you have to kind of retool your thinking. You have to constantly question yourself. Constantly, when I'm doing plans, I'll look at it and go, you can't do that. You're doing that because it's easy. And you're doing that because, well, now that's taken care of. But it's not going to float because these they're the same kids and they're a nice group. They really are. But it's a completely different environment. You can't approach teaching them technology at all the same way that I used to. It's just, they're not accessible in the same way. You have to figure out, and I know it's cliche and all that, but you got to figure out, how can I talk to where they are? And it used to be kind of, you could talk to the classroom as a whole and the chemistry. You could depend on the dynamics and the chemistry to perform I put an input and output comes this sort of predictable thing based on past performance. But now to teach them things, even like Flipgrid, which is a pretty simplistic thing, it took a while for that to take hold, because the isolatory factor it's powerful. So it took me way longer this year to come to realize what, Laura, you're getting a lot of credit in my response. So yesterday during some texts, Lori said, when she was reiterating what Dr. Barnes has said way back in August and July for this year, it's not about how much you cover, it's about how well it's covered, right? And he kept talking about mastery and that kind of thing, which is great no matter what the year. But Lori yesterday said how freeing this year was, and she just got into that a little while ago when she was responding to you. But she said it's quality over quantity. And that makes a more complex idea pretty simple, but it captures it. And if you think about that, it's really about, are they getting it? Or are you just going to, I covered my base and now I'm going to move on? Because and Patrick can relate to this. This is such an uncomfortable time. I know we're heading into the last third part of the year, and there are people who are chomping at the bits. They can't wait for this year to end because they are still really uncomfortable with it. So for me, and I know I got off topic a little bit, but it really has been extremely educational in this thinking to rethink things and not try and fit the old into because it won't work. It won't, it's oil and water. It won't work.
I'm curious, you've said, I mean, there's a couple of pieces in there that really caught my attention. The first one, though, I'm interested in, can you provide, even if it's a simple anecdote of like something that you sort of expected to work and then were surprised to find out early in the year that it didn't? Because you mentioned that there was a lot of really interesting insight as well, in the sense that, like, all right, class culture can drive a lot. Like, and the better your class culture is, the more forgiving your class is when your lesson plans are weak, because you bought some of that with the trust, with the culture, with the momentum that's built when half the class is going to do what you say anyway. You know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden you move to a place where that cultural dynamic is completely done and the students are feeling uneasy, and then you don't have that margin for error anymore. I thought that was very insightful. That type of reflection isn't something that we've heard yet with any of our other guests, and I think it's right down the middle.
Yeah, there's probably if I had a list, like, things that have gone well. Well, I'm on half a page so far. Things that have not gone well. Well, I'm on my second notebook. Kind of like that. And that's fine. You have to look at that from a positive point of view. Otherwise, this is a disaster, right? It's a whole train wreck. And if you decide that this year was a train wreck, then you're really lost an opportunity. And we talked about that a lot. Remember that, you guys, back in last summer, we were talking about that. But I can think of So when we got into this is Google Drawings, that was my one big encouraging thing. Like they really caught on fast, and I was amazed. I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. And then presentations, slides, and they caught on fast, and they're really good style. They just had most of the kids had a really good sense of it. You didn't have to teach too much of it. And then it came to inserting videos. Oh no. No, that camera's not going on, Mr. Man. I had kids, so I have 23 students, right? When I did my first Flipgrid, showed them an example, did a screencast of it. This is how it works, you can do these goofy things, because some kids like that. Some kids think, really, how old am I? But it was, out of the 23 kids, 12, so a little more than 50%, emailed me. They're great about emailing, by the way, saying, can I do the Flipgrid, but make it so that all you do is hear me? And that's when I realized, okay, I'm up against it. This is good.
A little tape
So
over the camera, maybe.
Exactly. I mean, I had 5 of them not respond to my response response that said, well, the whole idea is Flipgrid is to record you. I'm the only one that's going to see it, right? I'm not going to make it available for other people. So 5 kids, nevertheless, 5 or 8, still did it, and they had their cameras were blocked. They did a nice job, but all I could do was hear them, and that kind of takes away from. See, that was my first chance, my first try at building a relationship somehow, one-to-one, without, because they're frowning on us doing breakout rooms one-to-one. So that went south pretty quickly.
Well, they let you know where the students let you know where their boundaries were.
Big time.
And that's something that you weren't going to learn until they told you, because that's not the kind of thing that you can tease out any other way. Like, I can't figure that out until I give you an opportunity and I realize that you guys are going to reject it. Now, thankfully, they gave you exactly why. They didn't just not turn it in and not say anything. They redirected and gave you a window into, like, they're willing to play the game, but they were uncomfortable with this piece.
Right.
I can integrate that in. And we got 180 days of this, so I'm gonna have to meet you in the middle at some point,
One of the things that Lori and I saw at a session at McCall were 2 teachers at a high school that decided, not a high school, because second grade teachers, they had decided they were going to, I guess, flip their content. And one of the biggest takeaways from the session, and I'm bringing this up only because it's not just a student problem. It's a adult and student. It's a personality problem, maybe. But the teachers said, get over yourselves. You're going to see yourself in video, and you're not going to be comfortable with it, but you need to get over it. And I know it's hard for us to have that conversation with the students, but I guarantee you there are teachers that are still not comfortable today seeing themselves on camera.
No doubt about it.
So one of the things that I tried to encourage Tim to use, and I have with a few other teachers, is me emojis. So use their phone or their parents' phone if they have it available and record themselves talking, but it's an emoji of themselves talking. It's not actually video of themselves, and potentially put that in your Flipgrid response. But the strongest message I got out of that session we had at McCall is we need to get our teachers modeling for our students that it's okay to be on camera. It's okay if we, don't like the way we look, because we're not here for a fashion show. We're here for teaching and learning and, expressing what we know and helping other people understand things better. Maybe that makes sense.
Oh, for sure. And I think too that, like, you're right. There's a certain amount of, like, repetition to that. And some teachers, one of the reasons they don't edit their stuff is because they're more comfortable with the little mistakes that they make than they are hearing their own voice over and over again, editing stuff out. Like, some of those edits aren't really all that time consuming to make. Some of them are, but some of them aren't. But they'd prefer to have those in there and model that imperfection than they would to hear their own voice, which is, I don't know that one's better than the other, but I mean, it's easy for me to say. I don't love giving that advice because I think, like, I'm like outlier low in self-consciousness when it comes to that kind of thing. So it's like, it's easy for me to say, just record yourself giving them directions and then put it out, and people are like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think part of that is, Patrick, as you said, modeling as a teacher, doing that for students. And then Tim, what you mentioned about building that classroom culture, which can be obviously harder virtually, but creating that culture that you are modeling, trying new things, whether it's showing your face on the camera or hey guys, we're going to try this new tool today. We're going to try this lesson. I've never taught it before. Give me some feedback, and really having the students kind of own like your experience, and that like, I'm trying this. This is okay if it fails, and owning that failure and allowing it to be okay. And then I think you slowly can, capture more buy-in that way as well. And then maybe slowly, maybe a little slower virtually, those kids will start trying those new things and maybe showing their faces and feeling a little less like it's such a big deal if they fail or if things aren't perfect. You've all said a bunch of really interesting things, but I think all three of you kind of connect to this concept of you this year have been able to use things that you've used in the past, but then also have used it as an opportunity to try new things.
We want to meet, we try so hard to meet everybody's needs, but the struggle in the classroom has always been, especially like I'm picturing math, especially breaking out into groups, trying to find something productive and meaningful for the kids to do while managing the behaviors of the kids that you're not with. Whereas virtually, yes, it's a lot of work up front to build those extra lessons or to like design them for the kids that need something higher, or the kids that need that extra boost, or who need some more support. But the beautiful thing is, once you built it, so you've got it for years to come. And so, and I feel like math has been probably where I've noticed it the most. And math is not even what I would consider like my first love or my strong area. But I feel like I've learned the most teaching math this year, and that it's not about just being all on the same page and everybody. It can be so much different now. It can be so much different.
The former high school math teacher in me really just wants to hear everybody say that math is their first love. It's the default that if you were taught right, you would have, just saying.
As we talk about this and these things that Lori has mentioned doing, and I haven't done the small group nearly as much as her, my fear factor is higher, I think. But you realize one of the freeing things about that, and of course now I'm like, wait, how many more weeks am I going to be able to teach virtually? Is you get spoiled. I mean, this whole change of the time construct is crazy. And if you use it to your advantage, it really works well. I mean, I am totally spoiled. Like, I hope I can do this all the way to June. And then I'll have to decide, what if they come and say, hey, do you want to do this, to start up next year? I don't know. But one of the things is, and as simple and selfish as it sounds, even though there can be a lot of resistance from kids, especially as they get older, about, no, the camera's not going on. Okay, you can work around that. But it's within the small groups, it works. One of the benefits is they're not sitting next to each other. They're not kicking each other under the tables. And yes, sixth graders will actually do that. They're not, shooting spitballs at each other, or now that they're a little older, giving the eyes, right? They're becoming frenemies. And then there's a whole level of drama in your classroom that is way more powerful than you are, but you don't have to deal with that. I don't even remember what that's like. So I'm thinking, oh crap, I don't want to go back to that. So I think Lori and I have come to the part where we're 180 degrees. We're juxtaposed from a lot of teachers who are like, oh, I can't wait to get back in the classroom. I hate virtual, blah, blah, blah. I want to get back to, like Patrick would say, the old way, my comfort zone. And with us, it's kind of like, yeah, but then I lose all this. All these things that they come sort of crashing down, because some things we're not going to be able to translate back into the classroom. It's just, especially at Wakusta, because we don't have, for the most part, we don't have walls, which becomes problematic. And I'm not making excuses. It's exciting to think, wow, I could do this. I could make it so that they're not all going to come to my math class. A third of them are going to be bored because they just want to get going. Science and social studies, that's a different animal. And so is English to an extent. But with math, it's kind of like they can come in, you tell them what's going on. This group will go ahead, they're off on their own, self-paced. That's awesome. It really is awesome. And then here's this group, maybe they're the low group, and I'll just work with them, even if it's to the point of having one kid in each breakout room, depending on the comfort level. So all those little tools, and you realize, wow, I can make this work to my advantage. And so I've been starting to look at my watch and go, I wonder how many more weeks they're going to let me teach virtually, because I don't want to lose that.
Well, and what happens, what happened a lot with the virtual, and this is, I think this is not an absolute good or bad. It just is. Like, initially it changed the dynamic, and Lori has alluded to this a little bit when she said, like, it was like you were able to narrow your focus, at least at first, to the things that were the most critical things, because the effort level was going to be high because we were in creativity mode. And that was going to mean that you simply couldn't do all the things that you were going to do. You had to narrow your focus. Now, what happened with that often is that the narrowing of the focus created a dynamic where the students were coming to the Google Classroom or the Seesaw or whatever for a very well-defined purpose. And it usually had a lot to do with some academic task. Whereas that's never been what the classroom was really all about. I mean, it was mostly about that, but it wasn't all about that. The students were also showing up because there was breakfast or lunch. The students were also showing up because they had a special that they really liked and they needed to be there. Or by the time the students got older, they were showing up because they had practice, or because they needed to stay eligible for their sport, or because, there's lots of reasons that kids come to school. And that's a true thing. But there were not nearly so many reasons that the students were logging in. And that was a different dynamic. And so the question is going to become, what's the residual effect of that in the fall, when you do have a group of students who maybe really only found something appealing about the idea that I'm going to show up to my Google Classroom, get the checkbox tasks that I need to complete. I'm going to complete them, and then the rest of the day is mine, as opposed to getting kind of ushered around to these various structured tasks that I don't find a lot of value in. It's that kind of thing. I don't know the answer to that. Of course, there's all sorts of things we don't know the answers to, but maybe that's an interesting place to take the conversation next, is like, all right, so Tim's alluded a little bit to how much he's enjoying the virtual instructional model, and that's a good thing. Lori has said some similar things too, although it sounds to me in our conversations, Lori, like your thoughts are a little bit more mixed. Like, maybe I really am enjoying this, but I also did like being in the classroom with the student, all that. What do you envision the fall looking like? Okay, you come back to school, you got all your students with you.
Fall's going to be different for us from one very big perspective, in that we went from a district that had maybe 3 labs per building that the teachers could roll into their classroom to use for technology. We're going from that to a 1-to-1. So as much as the teachers have the potential to fall back on old routines or on their routines, they now have a class set of devices they can use with their students at any point in time in the day they want to use them. So there's a big difference from that perspective.
Sure.
And honestly, I really hope, when I think about the fall and going back, I really hope that as much of my day that I'm doing now, I hope as much of this carries over to the fall as I possibly can. Like, I have really felt good about this year, and I've really felt good about what we've been able to accomplish and what these kids have learned, and just kind of how we've pared it down to the more only I will help the kids on their free time instead of their parents. I guess that's the biggest for me. I feel like my instruction part, though, I would love for it to be, I don't know why it couldn't be as close to what I'm doing now. I just feel like it was an awakening this year. It was awakening to, and again, it could be very specific to the grade level because mine is so, I have such young kids, but Like we just we pack so much into their day, and we jump from this to this to this to this. I mean, almost like to the minute. And there is no time for any nonsense. There is no time for any, I mean, of course we have fun, and like, it's still fun, but it's not militant, like, but it is so tightly packed that it is like stepping back this year after like I said, 16 years in this grade at this school with this team going, oh my gosh, we just jump. Let's just like I told Tim yesterday, whoa, let's just slow this down. Like, I appreciate the quality that I'm getting this year, that I'm getting, and that I'm giving, and that I'm getting. There's a difference with this technology piece this year. I feel like it truly is more about the quality of what you're giving them than the quantity. We're not jump. Just slow it down, do the essentials, do the important things, maybe add on a little bit more next year. But
Sure.
Really, the biggest difference will be that I will be there to support them and to answer questions and to take care of them instead of their parents having to do it this year.
Well, and if you don't mind my maybe offering at least maybe a clarifying question, it sounds like the description of what you think has led to the changes that you're seeing the tech may have provided a vehicle, but it
Right.
sounds like structurally you've narrowed the number of items that you're doing, and that is something that perhaps if a teacher maybe didn't dive in as head first with the tech, but still did that piece, that they would be able perhaps to see some of those gains, that the tech has provided a mechanism for developing a richer experience perhaps, or to give you more options in terms of building that experience. But also it sounds like there's a not insignificant gain that's been made by simply asking the students to do less stuff, and then being able to, through that, insist that they do a better job with it. And then real quick, just one thing I'm just going to straight up object to. I've been in first grade classrooms, and there's always time for nonsense. Okay? Just saying, I've been in first grade classrooms, a little nonsense.
And I think you're absolutely right. It's just the whole dynamic has changed this year, and it's really shifted to, like I said, less is more. That's just kind of been the focus this year, like less is more. But also the technology has led to so much more collaboration between the teammates. And so within a grade level, you don't have to do it all. You're not all sharing. You build it, we share it. Like, I'll do this, you do that, I'll do this, you do that, share it, save it. And then next year in the fall, we're already 10 steps ahead because we already have everything we've built from this year.
Because the administration told the teachers, you know what, you're going to have to let some things go. Some things aren't going to work. Some things are going to have to fail. You're going to have to reduce some of the stuff you try and do because it's a very different environment than you've ever taught in before. I remember 5 years ago being in Lori's classroom trying to work on getting her some new skills, and the sheer amount of stress that she would feel if we got off track a little bit in what she was hoping to do in the 5 minutes we were going to be using to try out something in Google Classroom or try out something in SchoolNet. She's like, I can't lose my kids. I got to keep them engaged. I got to keep them on track. I only have a few seconds. If something doesn't work in a few seconds, I'm going to lose them, and then I'm going to lose the class. Well, we don't have a choice but to lose the class, because there's days when Zoom is 100%, and there's other days when we're trying to give an NWEA assessment and it doesn't work very well. So I hope that this is going to help us in the fall be even more comfortable with trying out the growth mindset when it comes to some of the new ways of using the tools in our classrooms.
Yeah. I mean, from the sounds of it too, and once again, I don't want to overstate the point, but like, some of what you're describing absolutely is like, we've got a more robust toolbox because we have been forced to develop these structures that we previously didn't have to develop. And that's certainly true. Obviously, with more robust toolbox, you have more options. But I'm also hearing you guys sort of laud the clarified goals and improved collaboration and these kinds of things. Whereas if you're establishing those types of conversations with your colleagues, I do think that there's going to be a tangible benefit to that as well. Even if you have some teachers perhaps who maybe don't jump on the tech bandwagon as strongly as some of the other teachers do, if you've established the habits of collaborating, of having good conversation, of sharing experiences and resources, I do think that that's a thing that will have a nice residual effect as well, because you have struggled together as a group. You have learned that you can trust each other. You have learned who you can have a hard conversation with and who you can go to for help and support. So it sounds like you guys are, fairly well positioned to come back in the fall and have a lot of different areas where you may see some value from this time of struggle that we've been in.
But I think Patrick's totally right too, when he said, I think he hit the nail on the head when he said our district though allowed us to make, they allowed us to be comfortable with, like they would say, it's okay if you streamline things. It's okay if you're not, strictly using this, like do the main things, like do that. It's okay if you make mistakes. It's okay if you're nervous. Like they just made, they really worked hard to make sure that like emotionally we were okay and that we were comfortable with, it's all right that you're scared. It's all right that you're not, 100%. Like it's okay that you're going to make mistakes. And I feel like that to me was very freeing this year.
Well, and I think that there's some advice in there for leaders too, who may be listening to this, and for those of us who do provide, leadership type experiences at times, to recognize that that when you give your teachers or students opportunities to take risks, and you are providing providing the comfort of them knowing that there really isn't that much risk. Like you might get chewed up in front of your students a little bit because the lesson plan goes bad. But like, I can remember the first time my principal, when I was teaching, observed a lesson that was a pure flop. Like it was a total flop. Nothing worked. The students didn't learn anything. The tech didn't behave itself. The lesson plan had to be redone the next day. Nothing worked. And he still gave me a good evaluation for it because based on the metrics he was looking for, the lesson was designed well. It was a reasonable and prudent try. Sometimes things happen and that's the way it goes. But like when he did that, he built in the atmosphere that, this is a place to take risks and to try things and to, take these tools for a spin a little bit, because it's never going to work every time. But if you insist on it working every time, what you have is a bunch of teachers who stay in this safer spot because they don't want to push the envelope because they know it has to work every time. And by him saying it doesn't have to work every time, you're okay.
How sad for our students if what we're instilling in our teachers is they have to be afraid of failure. Like this is one of the things that I've been saying to our admin staff for a while. We have to get our teachers comfortable with failing so that they can show to their students it's okay to fail. What's important is when you fail, how you respond. I've had several conversations with principals or with teachers who are saying, well, I can't do that tomorrow. It's my evaluation, Patrick. I can't have a mistake in my evaluation. And I said, you absolutely can. They're like, why would I do that? I said, because your principal is going to be able to see how you respond. That's what teaching's all about. You find yourself in a situation, you either know how to teach or you don't. And then when you don't, what do you do? That's the thing that becomes powerful. Not just did everything go flawlessly and it worked out exactly the way that I had planned. I would love it if our teachers felt more comfortable with failing. What's funny about that is I'll be in sessions where I'm teaching teachers some new skill about some new app and it won't work out. I'll like, I didn't expect that happening. And they'll be like, oh, we love when it fails on you, Patrick.
Yes. Yes, they do. All I do is
For sure we do when he has those moments.
I give a lot of tech trainings, and yes, the amount of peace that settles over a room when the guy who gives all the tech trainings experiences tech trouble is palpable. I agree completely.
But I remember at the start of the year when I would start Zooming, I'll never forget. I was texting or emailing with Patrick going, there's red lines that keep getting all over my math Zoom. I thought it was a connection. We thought it was the cord of we thought it was some cord that too much was running through my iPad, too many static. And Patrick helped me realize that I had my annotate on. My kids were drawing all over my screen. I had no idea, but it was, I mean, days of this red lines. Remember, Patrick? And I mean, it was an awakening, but I would always go, oh, yep, this is happening again, you guys. Like, put on a smile, like, oh man, yeah, sometimes it's technology, but inside I'm like dying inside. Like, I want to crawl into a hole, but you just put on a, like, it's okay. This happens to me too, you guys.
Throughout this conversation, there's been a lot said about the way that this struggle has helped us to realize things that we didn't realize before and probably would not have learned any other way. It takes being under duress sometimes. It takes being pushed outside. I mean, everybody knows that learning happens outside your comfort zone, but in this instance, you didn't have the choice but to go there. You were gonna be outside your comfort zone. Students were, parents were, leaders were, teachers were, coaches were. I mean, we were all trying to figure this out as we went. And in the process of figuring it out, we had to stretch ourselves, stretch our tools, stretch our relationships with our colleagues, stretch the boundaries of what success and failure really mean. And my hope for the system as a whole is that we have determined that those definitions that we brought to the table as a result of this year's struggle, that some of them we like better than what we were using prior. That a better definition of success, a better definition of collaboration, a better definition or a clearer definition of teaching and learning, of assessment and the roles of it, and those kinds of things. I really feel like, we can keep what we like about this struggle, and whatever was there prior is still going to be waiting for us when we come back. We can keep what we liked back in the before times too, but we can also harvest that which we feel is valuable and keep it as we head back. So thank you so much, folks, for taking the time to share with us. Lori, you want to wrap up?
Sure. I think if I just had one going away thought, it would be maybe two, but it would just be, I think, to encourage teachers to just stop and take a stance, just stand back and just see, like, think about how far you've grown, think about how far you've come and like what you've accomplished this year, because I think when you're in the thick of it and you're living it, you don't quite realize how far you've come and what you've tried and what you've built and what you've learned. And sometimes Tim and Patrick and I will say, we sometimes forget how much we know or how much we can do with technology because we just do it. So, I think every teacher has grown and just come so far in so many ways. And I think this is a really good time of the year to go, look what I've really done. That's pretty awesome. And you should be really proud of yourselves. Like, it's just a really good time to reflect on how far you've come. So, and I think my second takeaway would just be if there are teachers out there or staff who have never tried to explain everything, to seriously, like, just tell yourself one night, I'm going to sit down on my iPad for one night and I'm just going to build stuff and I'm just going to create some things. And I promise you, like, you will never look back and you'll be like, oh my gosh, how do I say that all the time. How would I have taught this year without it? How would I have lived this year without explain everything? So it's like immeasurable. Like I can't even say enough good things about what you can do with it and how you can build an arsenal of technology for your classroom. If you just give explain everything one try, just give it a try.
The word arsenal does not come out nearly often enough. Christy, you want to wrap up?
No, I love that. I think, we didn't really talk about the tools much today. We mentioned some tools, but I think that's come out a lot this year with the teams we've talked with, that they really have found the one tool that works well for the way that they want to deliver instruction, excuse me, and they've really dug into that. And so rather than feeling that sense of overwhelm when we're having to learn all these new things, find the one thing that works and really dig in and create those materials that, like Lori, you said, you feel like you really can differentiate for your students' various needs right now because of the technology and because of the materials that you're creating. And so I think, if anything, just to be able to hold on to that, I imagine that next year, if things are back to in person and all that, you'll be able to pull from your arsenal and create, different small groups that meet individual students' needs without maybe having to take the 10 minutes to pull out all the manipulatives and all of that struggle that you spoke about. So I'm looking forward to next year and seeing what lasts and what will become of teaching from what we've learned this year. And thank you guys, all three of you, for taking the time to chat with us today and share your story.
Tim, you want to wrap up?
I said, it's funny. It's ironic that Christy had that perspective in there, because I was thinking, what would I? Oh, okay. And I remember the first McCall conference I ever went to. I went to see a woman by the name of Leslie Fisher, who does a lot of app smash ups, and she's great and interesting. And it's overwhelming, because my first year there, you see so many of these great speakers and all this. Oh, I should do that. I should do that. I should do that. And at the end of one of her always packed sessions, she said, "Raise your hand if this is your first McCall." So I raised my hand. A bunch of people did. Most people didn't, however. And she said, this was Friday late morning, so getting close to close out, right? And she said, "I have some advice to you." And she said, "You have probably made notes and called people and texted people and posted on Twitter, all these amazing apps that you're going to use." Said, "Here's my big piece of advice. Don't try all of them. Try one of them and try to use it in your classroom this year. Don't try anything else. Try one thing and try and build that into something that you can use again when you come back in the fall, to start over." And that's what I would say to teachers would be, because there's a whole gamut of reactions to this year. Not all of them great, not all of them horrible, most of them in between. But think of one thing one tool that you came to rely on, even if you think, well, that's no big deal, but did you know it before? It's something you learned this year. Then take that with you and start with it. Don't deny the kids all this stuff that they've seen all year long. Don't just suddenly take that away, because a lot of them are excited about, wow, you guys are actually doing things that are part of our world for a change. Interesting. Use the one tool that you feel comfortable with to start with. Don't worry about doing 10 different things. Just one thing, because that's going to get you buy-in. And if we do that, then maybe all this great stuff that people have done this year to learn, they won't just let go because it was a little bit uncomfortable.
Allison, you want to wrap up?
So there are three things that sort of came out of this conversation that I want to highlight. And the first is the importance of mastery and having students really understand and learn the content and not just getting through the material, right? And I think we've always known that, but it's interesting that this experience, you keep talking about less is more, has allowed you to really kind of highlight how important that really is. The second thing is all of the resources that you used. It sounds like you've really been able to differentiate and offer individualized learning opportunities. And so I look forward to seeing you translate that to next year in whatever way that looks. And lastly, the importance of collaboration. I think you really hit the nail on the head there with, this would be very overwhelming if you were doing this in isolation and not necessarily sharing what you've created and then using what you've created to build upon for the rest of the year or next year and so on. So I applaud you for taking this year as an opportunity to try new things and to build off of what you're already doing. And I'm excited to hear how you approach next year in whatever environment that might look like for you.
Patrick, you want to wrap up?
Sure. This is my analogy. I want I want my teachers to set a goal, and I want it to be part of their personal goal in their evaluation. And I want them to do that because I want there to be some accountability at the end of the year. So at the beginning of the year, set some personal goals of either some new technology you're going to try, some technology you have been using but want to use better. Maybe you're going to look up Explain Everything, and that's going to be your one of your personal goals for your evaluation for next year. But like a New Year's resolution, I want this fall to be a New Year's resolution of some aspect of, I'm not going to lose the opportunity I was given. In the immortal words of Abby Burmeister, I'm not going to let this pandemic go to waste. I'm going to continue growing and using the tools even when we come back.
Lori Smith, Patrick Beimhold, and Tim Madden from Grand Ledge Public Schools. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having us.
Be sure to check out our full playlist of all of the Digital Instruction Network seasons, as well as check out our website at hashtag 517EdTech is our Twitter handle. And please join our mailing list here if you'd like to get any push outs of any 517 EdTech content or Digital Instruction Network episodes.